Jasmine Crockett sat perfectly still in the crowded congressional hearing room, the bright overhead lights reflecting softly off her emerald green suit as she listened to the furious rant unfolding across the chamber. On the opposite side, Pam Bondi, the former Attorney General of Florida, stood with her face flushed red, pointing directly at Crockett while her voice rose louder and louder, echoing through the hall. "You have absolutely no right to challenge my integrity," Bondi shouted, the microphone picking up every sharp edge of anger in her tone. Committee members shifted in their seats, uncomfortable with the escalating tension, but then something unexpected happened. Rather than reacting with the same level of fury, Crockett calmly adjusted her microphone, lifted her glass, and took a slow, steady sip of water. Her controlled, almost serene response set the stage for a moment that would spread across social media in hours, a moment that became the centerpiece of the entire hearing. Before diving deeper into this powerful exchange, make sure you hit the like button and subscribe so you never miss our clear, fast political breakdowns that cut through the noise. The hearing room buzzed with pressure as C-SPAN cameras captured every detail of the overflowing chamber. This particular oversight committee meeting had drawn unusual national attention, with members from both political parties preparing for a heated clash over a controversial federal funding proposal. Pam Bondi, famous for her tough courtroom demeanor, sat confidently at the witness table. Her perfectly styled blonde hair and tailored navy blazer gave her an air of authority. Republicans had chosen her as their star witness, hoping her presence would weaken the Democratic argument. On the committee bench, Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett, the freshman lawmaker from Texas, studied the documents in front of her with intense focus. At 42, the former civil rights attorney had quickly built a reputation for being sharp, articulate, and unshakable even when facing political veterans. Her emerald green suit stood out against the dark wood of the hearing room, and her neatly braided hair framed her concentrated gaze. Chairman James Langford struck the gavel. "The committee will come to order," he announced, his voice booming across the chamber. The hearing began with standard introductions, each side repeating familiar talking points. But everything shifted when Bondi launched into her testimony. "Confident, assertive, and accustomed to controlling a room," she said loudly. "This bill is fiscal irresponsibility at its worst." She looked directly at the Democrats. "These so-called urban development funds are nothing but political favors disguised as infrastructure improvements." Several Republicans nodded and smiled as she continued. "When I was Attorney General, I prosecuted corruption cases with cleaner finances than what I see in this legislation." Cameramen zoomed in on committee members, Republicans pleased, Democrats scribbling notes urgently. Bondi delivered her closing line with a flourish. "The American people deserve transparency, not political theater hidden inside an infrastructure bill." As questioning began, senior members took their turns. Republicans asked friendly, gentle questions that allowed Bondi to expand her attacks. Democrats, on the other hand, tried to push back, only to face her quick, dismissive rebuttals. Tension rose steadily. Then Chairman Langford spoke again. "The chair recognizes the gentlewoman from Texas, Ms. Crockett, for 5 minutes." A subtle shift moved through the room. Those familiar with Crockett's record, from her time in the Texas legislature to her civil rights career, recognized that something significant might be coming. Bondi tried to maintain her confident posture, but her eyes sharpened. She knew Crockett was known for precision questioning and for exposing inconsistencies quickly. "Thank you, Mr. Chairman," Crockett began, her voice steady and calm. "Ms. Bondi, thank you for your testimony today." She paused, looking down at a specific document. "Before we move into the details of this bill, I want to clarify some points you made regarding your experience with federal funding oversight when you served as Florida's Attorney General." Bondi nodded, relaxing slightly. "Of course, Congresswoman." What came next transformed a routine political exchange into a viral sensation that dominated headlines. Crockett looked directly at Bondi, her face neutral yet focused. "Miss Bondi," she said evenly, "you stated that you have extensive experience identifying misuse of federal funds. Could you explain your involvement?" in the decision to redirect $300,000 in federal pandemic relief money meant for Florida small businesses, funds that were instead shifted to an unrelated project in 2021? A flicker of surprise crossed Bondi's face before she regained her composure. "I'm not sure what you're referring to," she answered. "I left office in 2019 before any pandemic relief funds existed." Crockett nodded. "I'm aware of your tenure," she replied evenly. "I'm referring to consulting work your firm performed for the state after you left office. Specifically, I'm talking about your role in advising on federal allocations during which this irregular transfer occurred." The room grew tensely quiet as committee members realized Crockett's questioning was headed somewhere unexpected. Bondi's shoulders stiffened. "My firm gave general compliance guidance," she said defensively. "We were not involved in choosing where funds went." Without raising her voice, Crockett lifted another document. "I have an email from October 2021, she said, holding the paper up, "in which you personally approve reallocating those funds from small business relief to the Palmetto Highway project, the same project, where your firm represented a major contractor. Would you like to correct your earlier statement?" The cameras caught Bondi's eyes widening, her jaw tightening, the earliest signs that she realized she was losing control. "That is a misrepresentation of a very complicated situation," she insisted. "Those funds were redirected only after the small business program was fully funded." Crockett stayed composed. "Interesting," she replied. "Because the Florida Small Business Association filed a complaint stating they received only 60% of their allocated funds before the money was diverted." She held up another document. "I have their filing here. Would you like to address that?" Over the next minute, Crockett calmly presented document after document, each contradicting Bondi's earlier claims. Bondi grew more tense, her voice sharper, her responses less steady. And finally, after Crockett introduced a record showing possible conflicts of interest in Bondi's consulting work, the former Attorney General's composure snapped. Bondi shot halfway out of her chair, her face burning red. "This is outrageous," she shouted, her voice ringing through the chamber as the microphone squealed. She pointed aggressively at Crockett. "You are twisting facts and using cherry-picked documents just to create a political circus." Committee members looked stunned at the sudden explosion. Chairman Langford grabbed his gavel, but Bondi continued, shouting louder. "You Democrats always pull this nonsense. Manipulating evidence for your viral clips. I served Florida for years while you've barely been in Congress long enough to find your office. This is disgraceful." Her voice thundered across the chamber. She jabbed her finger again at Crockett, who still had not moved. Bondi's rage filled the room, her voice, her gestures, her loss of control, while Crockett remained still, quiet, and focused. The contrast was unmistakable. Cameras filmed every second. When Bondi finally stopped to take a breath, the room fell silent. Every eye turned to Jasmine Crockett. Everyone waited for her reaction. Instead of raising her voice or matching Bondi's anger, Crockett simply adjusted her microphone, took another slow sip of water, and looked her directly in the eyes. Her voice, when she finally spoke, was calm enough to cut through the air like a razor. "Miss Bondi," she said quietly, "I'm not here to attack your integrity. Your own emails did that for me." The tension inside the hearing room felt like it could snap. Pam Bondi's explosive outburst still seemed to vibrate in the air, her face bright with anger as she glared at Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett from across the table. Cameras captured every second of the moment, Bondi shaking with emotion while Crockett remained perfectly calm and composed. Committee members shifted in discomfort and Chairman Langford sat frozen, his gavel hovering as he hesitated, unsure whether to step in. Up in the gallery, the audience sat in total silence. Many had their phones raised, recording what they knew was becoming an unforgettable moment. Crockett's response, "I didn't come here to question your integrity. Your own emails did that for me," landed with pinpoint accuracy. Her voice never wavered. She didn't shout, she didn't flinch, she didn't react to Bondi's anger. Instead, she added, "The American people deserve accountability. Ms. Bondi, not yelling, not distractions, accountability." Crockett kept her gaze locked on Bondi, steady and professional. You've attacked this bill as irresponsible, yet documents tied to your own work raise serious concerns the public deserves to know about. Bondi tried to cut in, but Crockett didn't allow it. I haven't finished my time, Miss Bondi, she said firmly, still without raising her voice. And I'd appreciate the same courtesy I showed you during your testimony. The soft but unmistakable authority in her tone stopped Bondi cold. The former Attorney General sat in smoldering silence, visibly frustrated but unable to regain control. Crockett then addressed the chairman. Mr. Chairman, I'd like these documents added to the record. A staffer handed the folder to Langford as Crockett continued. These include the email exchanges I referenced, the complaint filed by the Florida Small Business Association, and financial disclosures connecting Ms. Bondi's consulting work to the contractors who received the redirected funds. So ordered, Langford said, speaking much more quietly than before, turning back to Bondi. Crockett said, Miss Bondi, I respect your years of service. I truly do. But when you appear before Congress making strong claims about fiscal responsibility, then your own professional record becomes fair to examine. Then Crockett introduced something Bondi didn't expect. Lifting up another sheet, she said, I also have the internal audit from the Florida State Comptroller's Office, dated January 2022, the same audit that flags the funding transfer we're discussing as irregular and recommends. Further review? She looked straight at Bondi. Were you aware of this audit? Bondi's face lost its color immediately. The earlier anger faded into confusion and concern. I haven't seen that, she stammered. That's unfortunate, Crockett said, still calm. Because it was sent to your office 3 times between February and April 2022. Each request for comment went unanswered. Cameras caught Bondi's expression shifting, anger replaced by worry. She glanced toward her party's side of the dais, perhaps hoping for rescue, but found only uneasy faces avoiding eye contact. Crockett pressed on, steady and factual. Miss Bondi, this is not personal. But when you criticize others for misusing federal funds, while documentation suggests you may have done the same, that's a credibility issue. She paused, letting the words settle over the chamber. The people of Florida, and of this entire country, deserve to know that federal money is being used correctly, not redirected to benefit connected companies, not left unexplained when official audits raise questions, and certainly not dismissed while you come before Congress and act as though these concerns don't exist. Phones across the gallery stayed raised, recording every word as Crockett calmly dismantled Bondi's argument. The contrast was impossible to miss. Bondi had erupted in fury. Crockett relied solely on evidence, patience, and preparation. And everyone watching could see clearly which approach was winning. My time is almost up, Crockett said, glancing at the clock. So I'll end here, Ms. Bondi. You questioned my short time in Congress, implying it made my questions less valid. But the length of my service isn't the point. What matters is that every question I ask is rooted in facts. She gathered her papers neatly. So instead of shouting about your integrity or dismissing my experience, perhaps you could simply answer the discrepancies documented in your own record. That's all I'm asking for, honest answers to honest questions. Crockett then looked to the chairman. I yield back the remainder of my time. Silence filled the room. Langford hesitated before clearing his throat. The gentlewoman yields back. We'll take a 10-minute recess. The moment his gavel fell, the room exploded into noise. Reporters rushed into the hallway to get their stories out. Spectators buzzed loudly, replaying the confrontation in their minds as staffers huddled around their representatives. Bondi remained frozen at the witness table, staring down at her paperwork, the fire in her demeanor completely gone. Across the room, Crockett gathered her materials calmly, taking a note from her aide without any hint of celebration. She had never raised her voice, yet she had unquestionably dominated the exchange. Out in the hallway, reporters were already on camera. A stunning moment in today's hearing, one correspondent announced. Pam Bondi lost her composure entirely, while Congresswoman Crockett responded with what can only be described as surgical calm. Clips of the exchange are already spreading rapidly online. And they were... Even before the committee reconvened, social media was overflowing with short videos of the confrontation. Calm Crockett and Bondi meltdown surged to the top of trending lists. Millions watched Crockett's most powerful lines, with captions like, "An absolute masterclass in staying cool under pressure? This is how you dismantle intimidation with facts." A major political commentator tweeted, "Bondi thought volume would save her. Instead, she ran straight into a wall of receipts." It wasn't close. The post racked up tens of thousands of shares in minutes. News networks scrambled to analyze the moment. CNN ran an extended segment. "This was preparation beating emotion," one analyst explained. Crockett had documents, evidence, and discipline. Bondi wasn't ready. Meanwhile, Fox News took a different approach, with some hosts suggesting Crockett's questioning was too aggressive or planned as a political trap. Some conservative commentators tried to downplay the moment. One host insisted that Crockett's questions were nothing more than a setup meant to provoke Bondi, but even on right-leaning networks, analysts acknowledged the visual impact of the exchange. "Regardless of who you support, the optics are bad," admitted a Republican strategist. "When one person is shouting and the other stays calm, the public notices. And it never looks good for the one raising their voice." MSNBC replayed extended footage of the hearing with anchors applauding Crockett's discipline. "This is what oversight should look like," one host said. "Direct questions grounded in documents delivered without theatrics or personal jabs." The moment quickly jumped from politics into mainstream culture. Entertainment sites posted clips under headlines like, "Congressional clapback goes viral and watch this freshman rep school a veteran." "Politician without even breaking a sweat," even sports analysts chimed in. A well-known ESPN commentator tweeted, "Crockett played this like a championship game. Stay composed, let the opponent unravel, and stick to your strategy." That's elite-level discipline. By the evening, late-night hosts had already woven the confrontation into their monologues. One joked, "Pam Bondi learned a valuable lesson today. If you're going to come at the Queen, at least remember to use your inside voice." Public reaction was overwhelmingly in Crockett's favor. Commenters across social platforms praised her calm presence. "I'm conservative and don't usually agree with Democrats," one user wrote. "But anyone who can make a point without yelling has my respect. Crockett earned that today." Another user added, "My daughter wants to be a lawyer. I'm showing her this clip." This is how you defend your position with facts, evidence, and steady composure. As the video continued circulating, journalists dug deeper into the issues Crockett had raised. Several Florida outlets began investigating the pandemic relief money that had been redirected. Headlines asked bluntly, was Bondi's firm involved in redirecting small business relief funds? The Jacksonville Times-Union published an in-depth report confirming many details Crockett had mentioned. Their investigation found that internal emails clearly showed Bondi's consulting firm advising state officials on the fund transfer while simultaneously representing companies that benefited from the reallocation. The paper also confirmed the existence of the state controller's audit Crockett had referenced by the next morning. The story had shifted from a viral moment to a serious political development. Morning news shows covered the exchange extensively, noting that beyond the drama, Crockett had raised substantive questions about Bondi's prior work questions that had yet to be answered. A political scientist explained, "What makes this different from typical political theater is that there are actual documents, emails, audits, official correspondence supporting the concerns Crockett raised. This isn't just about who stayed calm. It's fundamentally a question of accountability." The impact on both women was swift. For Crockett, the boost was immediate. Her social media presence surged, gaining more than 200,000 followers on X in under 24 hours. Her office received messages of support from across the country, including independents and moderate Republicans who admired her professionalism. Progressive groups quickly moved to capitalize on the moment, launching fundraising pages featuring the clip with slogans like, "Support leaders who fight with facts not volume." Crockett's campaign saw a flood of small-dollar donations from every state, Bondi faced a very different response. Events that had previously booked her as a speaker began quietly removing her from their schedules. GOP strategists went on record advising future witnesses to learn from the incident and stay calm during questioning. More troubling were the ongoing investigations triggered by Crockett's documentation. The Tampa Bay Times launched a full review of the pandemic fund reallocation. The Florida Small Business Association released a public statement thanking Crockett for highlighting issues their members had raised for over a year. Bondi attempted to push back with a written statement through her spokesperson, calling the hearing a partisan ambush intended to distract from flaws in the Democrats' spending bill. Her statement also insisted that she stood by her record and would address any mischaracterizations in due time. But the response failed to slow the criticism, largely because it didn't address a single specific document or accusation Crockett had cited. By midday, Bondi scheduled an appearance on a sympathetic cable news program in hopes of resetting the narrative, but she faced an uphill battle. The viral clip of her shouting while Crockett remained composed had already taken root, dominating both social media and news coverage. Crockett, meanwhile, continued to project restraint. When reporters asked her about the confrontation the next day, she simply replied, "The hearing was about ensuring oversight of federal funds. That will continue to be my focus, regardless of how witnesses react to factual questions." Her understated response strengthened her emerging reputation for cool professionalism, something rare in today's hypercharged political environment. As the story grew, analysts across the political spectrum agreed on one central point. The exchange resonated because it showed something many Americans felt had become increasingly uncommon: an argument won not by shouting, but by preparation and composure. For millions tired of chaotic political clashes, Crockett's calm dismantling of Bondi's testimony was a breath of fresh air. Within 48 hours, the video had surpassed 50 million views across platforms. What began as a viral moment became a cultural reference point, used in discussions about effective debate tactics, professionalism, and the evolving tone of political communication. 3 days after the hearing, the ripple effects were still spreading. What started as a standard oversight meeting had become a defining moment with national implications. For Crockett, the attention grew more intense. Her office received interview requests from major outlets. Time magazine inquired about featuring her in an upcoming issue on New Congressional Voices. Talk shows invited her to speak about the confrontation, her background, and her legislative priorities. More importantly, high-ranking Democrats took notice. According to party sources, several senior leaders contacted her personally, impressed by her clarity and composure. Discussions were underway about assigning her more prominent roles in committees and offering her key speaking opportunities. The Congresswoman demonstrated exactly what effective oversight looks like. The House Democratic leader said when asked about the incident, "She came armed with facts, avoided personal attacks, and kept her cool even under provocation." That is the standard. But the spotlight brought challenges as well. The flood of messages and calls overwhelmed her staff, requiring temporary help to manage communications. Capitol Security increased its presence around her office after a handful of threatening messages from individuals angered by her questioning of Bondi, yet Crockett maintained the same disciplined approach. She continued her committee duties, declined most interview requests, and stayed focused on legislative work. Her communications director explained, "She appreciates the support, but believes the best response is to let her work speak for itself." This restraint boosted her reputation even more. "She's handling this exactly right," said a veteran political strategist. "No victory tour, no overexposure. That signals someone thinking beyond viral fame, someone thinking long-term." For Bondi, the picture darkened. Despite trying to reshape the story during media appearances, the imagery of the confrontation continued to dominate coverage. Worse, the investigations into her consulting work intensified. The Tampa Bay Times published an extensive report verifying many of Crockett's claims. Bondi's firm had indeed guided officials on redirecting relief funds from small businesses to infrastructure projects tied to her clients. Internal emails showed Bondi personally involved in discussions she downplayed at the hearing. In the aftermath, two organizations canceled upcoming events where she was scheduled to speak publicly, citing scheduling changes, but privately acknowledging the controversy. The Florida Bar Association released a statement confirming that it had received multiple ethics complaints regarding potential conflicts of interest in her post-government consulting work. Bondi's allies insisted she was being targeted for political reasons. Several conservative media figures attempted to frame the entire incident as a deliberate trap meant to embarrass Bondi and divert attention from the Democrats' spending bill. "This is classic distraction," one Fox News host argued. "They don't want to talk about billions in wasteful spending, so they go after the person instead." But these defenses couldn't overcome the verified documents Crockett had introduced, especially as journalists across the country began confirming the authenticity of those materials. Even some right-leaning outlets admitted the issues Crockett raised were substantial enough to deserve careful, nonpartisan review. Beyond the immediate fallout, the exchange ignited a much larger conversation about shifting expectations in public communication. Commentators began comparing the Crockett approach to the Bondi approach, and writers from both sides of the political aisle largely agreed that Crockett's evidence-driven calm was far more effective than Bondi's emotional outbursts. "There's a lesson here for every elected official," a columnist for The Atlantic observed. "In a time when every word is on camera and every raised voice becomes a viral clip, keeping your composure isn't just polite, it's strategy." Crockett understood the moment. Bondi didn't. Psychologists weighed in as well. One behavior expert explained in a widely circulated breakdown that Crockett's technique, remaining composed while her opponent became emotional, immediately increased her credibility in the eyes of viewers. "It's a universally effective method in negotiations, conflict resolution, and high-pressure debates," the expert noted. "People trust the person who stays steady." Schools took notice, too. Across the country, teachers began using the hearing clips in lessons on debate, persuasive speaking, and managing conflict. A Michigan debate coach told a local paper, "I had my students study this exchange. It shows perfectly how preparation and calm can beat volume every time. It's a masterclass in persuasion." Law professors echoed this sentiment. A Georgetown law professor explained, "I'm using this in my trial advocacy course. Crockett's technique, pausing, taking a breath, sipping water, and responding with facts is exactly what we teach future litigators." By the week's end, the hearing had produced something rare in modern politics, an almost universal agreement about what effective communication looks like. Polls showed that Americans across party lines overwhelmingly preferred Crockett's style over Bondi's, with 76% saying they trusted someone who remained calm under pressure more than someone who relied on heated emotion. For Crockett, this turned into real political momentum. Her quarterly fundraising numbers surged, fueled by small donors nationwide. Even more significant, her colleagues in Congress began seeking her advice on messaging and committee strategy. "There's a before and after to Jasmine Crockett's career," a senior Democratic strategist remarked. Before the hearing, she was a promising freshman. After the hearing, she became a communications powerhouse who proved you can be devastatingly effective without the theatrics that alienate moderates. Bondi, on the other hand, faced a very different consensus, and it was overwhelmingly negative. Republican strategists privately admitted that her behavior had backfired badly, hurting not only her own image but the broader party message on government spending and accountability. "The problem isn't just that she raised her voice," a GOP consultant said privately. "It's that she created the perfect visual symbol of everything voters hate: shouting, finger-pointing, and avoiding the actual substance." As the initial viral wave faded, the long-term impact became clearer. Beyond the personal consequences for both women, the moment created a rare point of agreement in a deeply divided political climate. Facts delivered calmly speak louder than anger delivered loudly. It was a simple message, but one that resonated widely. even as the policy details eventually faded from memory. The image of Crockett's composed demeanor in the face of Bondi's outburst remained a lasting reminder that how we argue matters as much as what we argue about. 2 weeks after the hearing that reshaped their public reputations, Jasmine Crockett and Pam Bondi were living dramatically different realities. For Crockett, the viral moment translated into real influence. Democratic leaders appointed her to a special task force focusing on government accountability, a prestigious role rarely given to a first-term representative. Her office reported that senior lawmakers, who previously barely interacted with her, now actively sought her thoughts on communication strategy and committee, questioning what Congresswoman Crockett demonstrated wasn't just strong optics, it was effective oversight, the House Majority Leader said at a press event. She showed how preparation and a focus on facts can cut through the noise. Crockett used her growing visibility carefully. Rather than booking TV interviews, she focused on legislation. She introduced a bipartisan bill to strengthen disclosure rules for former government officials working as consultants. This isn't about any one person, Crockett explained. It's about ensuring that when officials leave public service, their new roles don't conflict with their duty to the American people. Her deliberate, measured approach only increased her credibility. A Washington Post profile described her as combining a civil rights lawyer's precision with a new generation's composure. The article also noted she had declined high-paying speaking offers and book deals to stay focused on her congressional responsibilities. Her reputation grew inside committee rooms as well. Witnesses now came prepared when they saw her name on the roster. When Crockett starts reviewing her notes, you can feel the room tense up, a committee staffer told Politico. Nobody wants to be the next Bondi clip. They're much more candid with her than with others. The impact reached back to her Texas district, where her approval ratings climbed sharply. Local businesses displayed signs reading, "Keep calm and Crockett on," and even voters who disagreed with her policies praised her professionalism. "I don't vote Democrat," a local business owner said, "but I respect how she handled herself. She didn't yell. She just laid out the facts. We need more of that." For Bondi, the aftermath was far harsher. What began as a viral moment became a sustained period of scrutiny. Multiple news outlets filed public records requests to investigate her consulting firm's ties to state contractors. The Florida Ethics Commission announced it was reviewing complaints about potential conflicts of interest. Standard procedure, but still damaging in the press. Professionally, the impact was swift. 3 organizations canceled her upcoming speaking events, publicly citing scheduling conflicts, but privately acknowledging they wanted to avoid the controversy. A planned book deal about her law enforcement career was put on hold. Inside Republican circles, her standing dropped sharply. Campaign officials said she was no longer being requested as a surrogate. "It's simple," one GOP strategist said anonymously. "Why attach your candidate to someone whose most famous moment is losing her temper on camera? There are plenty of surrogates without that baggage." Bondi's attempts to shift the narrative didn't help. Her appearance on a friendly cable network backfired when she again grew visibly angry while discussing Crockett, reinforcing the public's impression rather than correcting it. She made the same mistake twice, a communications expert noted. Responding emotionally to criticism about being emotional only deepens the problem. That's Communications 101. 10 days after the hearing, Bondi announced she was temporarily stepping back from public appearances to focus on client work, widely seen as an admission of the damage done. Political analysts agreed this marked a major setback for someone who had been positioning herself for future campaigns or appointments. The incident also reshaped conversations in political training programs. Several nonpartisan campaign schools incorporated the exchange into their curriculum. "We call it the Crockett contrast," explained one director. 2 approaches, side by side, and one overwhelmingly wins with voters. Several conservative commentators quickly tried to frame the entire situation as a staged political move meant to embarrass Congresswoman Crockett and shift attention away from the Democratic spending bill. One Fox News host called it classic misdirection, arguing that Democrats were supposedly hiding billions in unnecessary spending by attacking the person who exposed it. But this talking point fell apart almost immediately. The documents Crockett provided were verified by reporters across multiple outlets, and the evidence backed up everything she had said in the hearing. Even a few conservative publications admitted that the issues she raised were real, serious, and deserved honest discussion instead of partisan. The fallout from the exchange didn't stay limited to the two women involved. It quickly opened a larger national conversation about how standards for political behavior are evolving. Opinion writers compared what they called the Crockett method to the Bondi approach, and the comparisons were not flattering for Bondi across the political spectrum. Analysts agreed that Crockett's calm, fact-based technique carried far more weight than Bondi's emotional confrontation. As one columnist in The Atlantic put it, in a world where every moment is recorded, composure isn't just good manners. It's a strategic advantage. Crockett recognized that. Bondi did not. Psychologists also began weighing in. A behavioral expert noted that Crockett showed the exact communication skills used to defuse conflict in high-pressure environments. By staying composed while the other person became emotional, she held the trust of the audience. According to the psychologist, this strategy works not only in politics but in business negotiations, classrooms, and even personal disagreements. Teachers across the country began showing the clip in lessons on debate, public speaking, and conflict resolution. One high school debate coach in Michigan told a local paper, "I had my team study the moment frame by frame. It's the best example I've seen of how preparation and calm can overpower volume and theatrics." Law schools also took notice. A Georgetown law professor said she had already added the clip to her trial advocacy course. "I want my students to understand how effective it is when a Leo refuses to be rattled," she explained. Crockett's pause, sip of water, and fact-based reply is exactly the method we teach future litigators. By the end of the week, something unusual had happened. Americans seemed almost united in their reaction. A national poll showed that, regardless of political affiliation, 76% of respondents believed a calm, rational demeanor is far more trustworthy than emotional outbursts. For Crockett, that translated into real political momentum. Her fundraising numbers spiked, especially among small-dollar donors nationwide. Inside Congress, senior members began asking for her advice on messaging and committee strategy. A veteran Democratic strategist summed it up. "There's a clear before and after in Jasmine Crockett's career. Before the hearing, she was a promising newcomer. After it, she became a communications force who proved you don't need theatrics to be effective." For Pam Bondi, the reviews were far harsher. Republican strategists privately admitted that her performance had been a major setback, not only personally, but for broader GOP messaging on spending and government oversight. One consultant put it bluntly, "The problem isn't just that she got angry. It's that she created a visual symbol of everything voters dislike, yelling, finger-pointing, and personal attacks instead of addressing the facts." As the immediate chaos faded, analysts began reflecting on the deeper significance of the exchange. Many agreed that the moment highlighted a truth often forgotten in modern politics. Calm, fact-based arguments carry more weight than emotionally charged accusations. While the specific policy disputes of that hearing may eventually fade from memory, Crockett's composed response is likely to remain a defining example of how professionalism can outshine theatrics.